Chapter 1. Return to silence. The road to the house wound in a serpentine fashion, diving into the grey clouds, as if it did not want to lead Alice to where it all began. The locals called this path the thread of breath. It wound along the ridge, where the air became thick, almost viscous, and it seemed as if the landscape itself held memories. Auntie's house stood on the edge of a cliff, where the wind never died down, and at night you could hear the lapping of the waves below, too rhythmic to be accidental. It was built of heavy stone, polished by years of rain and salt air. Alice had not been here for almost 20 years. All she remembered was the smell of lavender in the cupboards, the dusty light in the kitchen, and Aunt Mary's gaze, dry and calm, like old books. When she opened the door, the air inside was thick, like an inkwell forgotten in the sun. The house did not seem abandoned. There was a cup on the table with a broken tea leaf in it, as if someone had just gotten up and forgotten to finish the drink. But Alice knew, her aunt was gone. She had died 6 days ago, quietly, in her sleep, leaving her the house and a short letter, never look in the cellar for what was buried by the heart. At first she didn't pay attention. She was tired, burnt out, squeezed to the crumb by people and the noise of the city. Here, among the pines, in the house with cool windows and creaky floorboards, she wanted only one thing: to be quiet. To forget. To go inside herself. But the house did not allow it. The first night she could not sleep. The wind tugged at the shutters, somewhere a sash was knocking, and through the wooden paneling of the wall she heard, not steps, no breathing. Slow, confident, as if someone was lying in the next room and sleeping, but not too deeply. It even seemed to her that the air was vibrating slightly, as if from a voice not spoken aloud. In the morning, she found a smooth black stone on the windowsill. It had not been there before. It was slightly warm. She held it in her palm and suddenly something long forgotten flashed in her head: her mother. A blurry face, a voice without words, but a presence. She had been told that her mother had died in childbirth. But for some reason the smell of lavender and this feeling of touching her hair, it was alive, and it belonged to someone else. Alice clutched the stone in her fist and looked at the house. It no longer seemed simply old and forgotten. It was waiting for her. And in this silence, filled with the noise of the past, for the first time in many years she felt not only memories were waiting for her. Chapter 2. Secret Floors of Memory. The next morning the sun did not appear at all. A milky gray sky hung over the coastal cliff, and misty streaks stretched from the pines, as if reluctantly releasing the night. Alice woke early, although she did not remember how she fell asleep. There was a dull ringing in her ears, as if someone had spoken to her in a whisper for a long time during the night, and now the words had disappeared, leaving only a vibration. She walked barefoot to the kitchen. The cold floor tickled her heels, and every step echoed with a creak, as if the house wanted to remember her every move. On the table lay the object again, an old key, darkened with age, with an intricate spiral-shaped head. She recognized it. It had once been in Aunt Mary's drawer, but then no one knew where it came from. No door in the house fit it. At least then. Now, looking at the key, Alice suddenly felt that she knew where it led. She didn't know, she felt it. Under the stairs, in the corner where the old coat rack always covered the wall, there was a narrow door. It was never noticed, never looked for. As if it was always part of the shadow, part of the silence, part of what should not be found. She pulled the coat rack aside. Her heart was pounding. The door was there. The keyhole matched the key perfectly. With a soft click, the door gave way, releasing air that smelled of earth, iron and something like dried flowers. Behind it was a steep staircase leading down into darkness. Alice lit an old kerosene lamp. It stood on a shelf, and, strangely, was filled. Someone was preparing this place for her return. The basement was not just a basement. It was cut right into the rock. The walls were rough, the ceiling low, and in the back, a stone-lined well. Next to it, a wooden box, lined with brass corners. The lamp trembled in her hand, the flame drawing moving shadows on the walls. In the box were letters. Dozens. tied with ribbons. All addressed to Laura. Laura. Not Mary. Not a stranger. Laura, that was her middle name. No one had ever called her that. Ever. On the first envelope, in calligraphic handwriting, was written, "For Laura, when she gets home. Sorry I didn't get there in life." The words were from Aunt Mary. But the letter was dated 8 years before Alice was born. She collapsed on the floor, her back against the cold stone, her fingers shaking. The world was beginning to crack at the seams. A feeling was rising in her, not fear, but recognition. As if something that had always lived deep within had finally raised its head. And then she heard it, not a sound, but a call. Distant, barely perceptible, like a lullaby in the womb of time. The house whispered. And now Alice knew, this was not just the house of her childhood. This was the house of her origins. And everything she knew about herself began to crumble into dust. Chapter 3. Call from the Deep. Alice spent the rest of the day half asleep, as if with each line of the letter she read, something old, ancient, forgotten not only by her consciousness but also by time, was awakening in her. The lamp had long since gone out, but she no longer needed the light, everything she needed to see seemed to glow inside. At dawn, she went down again to where the cellar dug into the rock, where the letters remained in their box, as if they had been waiting for centuries. She took another one this time without choosing. The handwriting was the same. The words as if breathing, alive. You will return, even if you forget who you are. Because the place calls stronger than memory. This was not just a house. It knew her before she was born. It waited for her, like a forest waits for spring. Alice stood for a long time at the well. The water was dark and thick, and in the reflection she saw a face that was not her own. There was a girl with long blonde hair, like her grandmother's when she was young. Only the eyes were her own. Memories began to seep through like water through cracks. Not flashes, but shadows, the smell of lavender in a warm room, a voice singing behind the wall, books with blank pages where words only appeared at night. She understood, she was here. Not in this body, not in this life, but in this place. Laura, a name that seemed to her just a second name on her passport, was more than that. It was her real name, the one before birth, before oblivion. On the third day, the dungeon changed. When she opened the door again, the air was different. A faint smell of burnt wood, and in the far corner, a staircase going down that had not been there before. The stone steps went deeper, to where the ground became damp and dull. Her heart was beating, but not from fear. From anticipation. She went down. There was a hall below. Round, with symbols laid out on the floor, spirals, lines, signs, as if cut with a knife from time itself. In the center stood a wooden figure, rough, ugly, but there was something familiar about it. Warmth emanated from it, like from an old stove. And with it feelings, loss, betrayal, love, fear. Everything that she could not explain. And a voice. Quiet, barely audible, like a thought. You remembered. So you are ready. At that moment, the walls of the hall trembled, and she saw not with her eyes, but as if from within herself, another, standing here, many years ago. Laura. She was holding the same lamp. She was crying. She was saying goodbye. Saying goodbye to herself. Alice understood. Home was not just a memory. It was a knot between lives. A place where souls returned to remember that they were not alone. Where you could not lie, not to yourself, not to the past. She dropped to her knees. For the first time, not from fear, but from recognition. Everything that was happening was not accidental. And all that was left for her was to accept. To hear. To answer. In the darkness, her palm felt the same gray stone that was in the letter. Smooth, with a hollow in the middle as if it knew her hand. You are here. And that means it is only just beginning. Chapter 4. The House That Didn't Forget. The next morning, the sky above the village was covered with a thick fog, and the sun barely made it through the white curtain. Alice stood at the window, watching the world behind the glass as if dissolving into a milky void. Yesterday's vision did not leave her. The memories that had awakened in the basement were not a dream. She felt it with her body, her skin, every bone. And now the house, which had once seemed like just an inherited old building, had become something much more to her. It breathed with her. She decided to walk around the neighborhood to where the path behind the barn, overgrown with wet grass, led. Her steps were soft, as if the earth was trying not to give her away. She did not know why she was going, she just walked. And everything inside her told her she was going in the right direction. In the thicket behind the house she saw an old foundation, a ruined structure, traces of a former building. In the center, a faded mosaic, almost completely hidden by moss. Alice knelt down and ran her fingers over the smooth tiles. And as if she had touched a switch, a sound began in her head, laughter, voices, music. A woman in a wreath of daisies danced barefoot, her dress fluttering in the wind. A man with gray hair at the temples hugged her from behind, whispering something in her ear. And a girl, very small, in blue, ran along the path, carrying a teddy bear in her arms. It was her. In another life. Or in this one, but earlier. An echo of time dissolved in this place. She returned to the house silently, without thoughts. Everything became clear, as if a radio had been turned off in her head, leaving only silence and a pulse. She went to the mirror in the hallway, an old one, in a cracked frame, which she hadn't paid much attention to before. Words were appearing on the glass, sweat, like breath. Remember why you came back. Her heart sank. She hadn't come back for the inheritance. Not for the silence or rest. This house had called her. It held a piece of her soul, lost in a series of years, moves, decisions made not by the heart, but by fear. And now she had to choose, to return to her old life, where everything was correct and understandable, or to stay here, in a house full of shadows, but also truth. That same night she burned the letters. Not out of anger, but out of closure. Everything that was written, she had already absorbed. Everything that needed to be remembered, she remembered. The ashes in the fireplace glowed strangely, and through them, in the reflections of the flames, she saw the eyes of the one who had once lived in her. Laura. Alice. Everything was one. The next morning the fog cleared. The sun was shining outside again, and the leaves on the trees rustled differently. The wind no longer seemed strange, it called her by her real name. She stayed.